I'm Dr. Jill Johnson. I've spent my entire career in education. I started in the classroom, then trained teachers, and most recently served as a high school administrator. Now I help highlight the stories, struggles, and successes in educating the next generation of content creators. Welcome to CGTV.
Well, hey everyone. I am KristinSukraw, and I am the executive producer at Storyfind Films. We just changed our name from Reliant Studios to Storyfind, so if I say Reliant at any point today, I am talking about Storyfind Films. It's just been 12 years in the same name, and now we're something different, so same name. I'm also the author of the book Storyfind, the nonprofit handbook for finding and telling your most impactful stories. It's coming out November 1st, and I'm also super excited about that. At Storyfind Films, we are a production company that specializes in telling nonprofit stories from around the world. So we get to go into organizations and help them find and select their best storytellers for the content that they are putting out into the world. And it's actually kind of a pretty cool job. I'm honored to be a part of it. My background is actually as a licensed mental health practitioner. I was a practicing therapist for several years. So a lot of what I want to talk to you guys about today is how to take great care of the people that you are putting on camera or out on your social media platforms so that their voices are heard in a way that really empowers them to tell their stories well. So just want to invite you into a peek into my world of storytelling, and let's go on a little journey of storytelling together. So, overview of the day, we're going to look at 3 different things. We'll look at the power of story. We are going to look at how to create a really impactful messaging strategy, which sounds boring, but it's actually really fun. And then finally, I'm going to walk you through, if any of you out there conduct interviews, some simple interview techniques that can take your interviews from what can seem like kind of a boring back and forth Q&A dialogue to a really robust conversation that will help your interviewees, your storytellers open up in brand new ways and help you get really amazing content to put out into the world. So, the power of story, let's dive into that. Stories are truly, really, really amazing things. It's kind of a bizarre career to get into, storytelling, but it is also the most fun career to be a part of. Stories are really amazing. When told well, they have so much power. They have power to heal, to unite, to inspire, to create change, to inform. They are truly the oldest business strategy in the book. Tell a story, get a response, someone buys something from you. And at Storyfind Films, it is our honor to get to employ this ancient art form of storytelling to help nonprofit audiences move as a response to what they just saw. So usually we're asking people to give as a response to a story. Sometimes it's just to inspire thinking in a different way, or involvement or sponsorship. Storytelling moves people. So before we get started and dive into specifics, I want to introduce you to my friend Rita. And Rita was a student at a school called Concordia College, Alabama. This is a small HBCU, historically black college and university in Selma, Alabama. And she was brave enough to tell her story on behalf of the university to help them raise more money, to help all of the students who were just like her coming alongside behind her. And so I want to reference back to her story throughout today. So I want to introduce you to her first, and then we'll use her as kind of a reference point. So this is Rita.
I remember when I was in high school and we got ready to graduate. And I went to my counselor, and she told me that I was not college material. And she said that I should take a job at the factory because I should not apply to any colleges because I would not make it. I believed her. Dr. McNair Ramsey, he was the pastor at Emmanuel Lutheran Church. And he said, hey, He said, you in college? And I said, no, sir, I never even thought about college. He said, you ever heard of Concordia? No. And he said, we're going to bring some teachers. He said, would you be interested if we brought some teachers to the church to have some classes like during the week or whatever? Sure. That's how I got interested in what education really was all about. You know, it wasn't just about books and stuff. It was about somebody caring enough and seeing something in you and wanted you to be your best. Dr. Ramsey has been with me since the beginning. I remember when I started back to school, doing my last 2 years, a few years ago, he had gotten really, really sick. And I said, I'm back in school. And he said, you know what? If it's God's will, I'll be at your graduation. And he was there. He was the first face that I saw when I walked through those doors. I can look at the kids in my classroom and tell them, it does not matter where you started. It does not matter. That does not have to be where you end up. But that's what I've learned from coming to Concordia. I did not believe in myself. Not until I started here. And I want to instill that in somebody else's child.
Okay, so that's Rita. Really simple story, really simple production value with a lot of really clear messages and ideas that the audience can take away. The thing that is so beautiful about storytelling is that it is a collaboration. Kendra Hall, she's the author of the book Stories That Stick, and she talks about this concept that in order to tell a story or to put content out into the world, you have to have someone on the other side who's receiving it. So as you listen to Rita's story, you hear this woman who went into her high school guidance counselor's office, and that guidance counselor told her that she was not college material. How many of you in this room can relate to the fact that someone has told you at some point in your life that you're not quite good enough, that you don't quite measure up, that maybe you're not going to make it? You start to apply your own story over Rita's story, and that creates that human connection to the storyteller. The other way it's collaborative is, as Rita goes on to tell her story, she talks about the high school guidance counselor told her she should get a job at the sewing factory. How many of you in the room were picturing a sewing factory as she was talking about that? Maybe it's the inside, the outside. You start to visualize in your own mind and create images to pair along with their story. And that is a really beautiful thing, because that is what's going to take the content that you put out into the world and drive your audience to do something with what they just saw. They're overlaying their own pictures, they're overlaying their own life stories into these things, and they're going to be moved and respond to it in some way. And it's really, really a cool thing. So storytelling is collaboration. How do you take it a step further and make your audience engage with what you're putting out into the world? So I'm gonna make you all do something really awkward. Make a triangle with your hands. This is throwing back centuries ago to a man named Aristotle. He created this thing that was called, you can put your arms down, thanks. Thank you all. He created this thing called the rhetorical triangle. And it comes from his theory of persuasion, his theory of moving people to respond to content, all the way back centuries ago in ancient Greece. And he said, if you can connect with someone's head up here at the top, their heart over the heart, and their need to trust you, your right hand, head, heart, need for credibility, he called it logos, pathos, ethos. If you can connect with people in those three ways in the content that you're putting out, they are going to respond to it. So logos, there's statistics, there's data. You want to tuck and fold that into the stories that you are telling. The heart, you want to make people feel something as a result of what they're putting out there. Rita, hers was obviously tears. We were working a donor audience. We wanted them to cry and to give money as a result of what they saw with Rita. But for a lot of people, you just want them to feel joy or happiness or a moment of relief from some pain they might be feeling in their life. So you've connected to their head, you have the data and statistics, you've connected to their heart, you have the emotion that comes out. And finally, they need to see you as a credible source at the end of the day. So you need to be putting out consistent, thoughtful content that is grounded and rooted in things that people will trust you with. So magic, how will you move someone to react to what you just saw? You connect to their head, their heart, and their need for credibility. Aristotle, hundreds of years old, the ancient art of storytelling. It's actually just the coolest thing to be able to take it and move it into a world that is now digital and online, but the principles still stand the test of time. So, Erin talked a little bit about this in her Q&A section, but it is the foundation of telling a great story. It's the foundation of putting great content out into the world. Before you ever make something, make sure that what you're creating is actually going to do something for you, otherwise you've just wasted a lot of time. So at Storyfind Films, every project that we create starts with a messaging strategy. And if you take nothing else away from this today, take away the importance of creating one of these before you put anything out into the world. How many of you know what a messaging strategy is? Have you taken marketing classes? If not, I'm excited to introduce it to you today. So at Storyfind, every project that we create goes through this process. We actually just did a series of TikTok videos for an organization out of London called Moonshot. So we flew to Poland, and even though we have all of our film equipment, we shot this all on iPhones. And it still went through this process of creating purpose before we ever got there to film this TikTok campaign. So, messaging strategy, 4 different things. You want to ask yourself the question, what are your goals? At the end of the day, what are you producing this content for? Make sure that is clear and concise up front. This doesn't have to take a long time to execute either. You can write a messaging strategy in 5 minutes. It's just you want your content to perform for you, and this is the best place to start. So what are your goals? What do you hope it will do? How will you define success? This is the part that everyone skips. They're like, I don't know, maybe people like it. But you want to know if what you're putting out there is working for you. So ask yourself, how will I know that I accomplished the goal that I set out to achieve? Third, who is your audience? If there's one thing that's the most important on this list, know your audience. Know who they are. Know what they respond to. Noah is here. He's going to speak later today. He has almost 1 million followers on TikTok. He knows his audience. He knows what they respond to, and every piece of content he puts out is to connect with them in some way. So be purposeful. Sometimes you can segment your audience and get specific and target them in new and unique ways, but make sure you know what moves their hearts to respond. And finally, at the end of all of this, what is your one big idea? You are going to put things out into the world that need to be clear and concise and that your audience doesn't get confused by. We work with a lot of organizations who have different departments, and sometimes they come to us and they say, can we just put a little of this in the video? And oh, can we just put a little of that in this video? It might be good if our audience, our donors know about our summer camp, and it might be good if they know about our Thanksgiving drive, and it might be good if they know about our after-school program. And if you try to include all of that in one package, you are going to have an audience that is confused, that isn't sure what they want to do at the end of the day, and they're going to walk away not responding at all. So, a one big idea is really clear. Rita's video, you saw it there. When we set out to find a story for Concordia College, Alabama, they said, we want you to tell a story where the one big idea is education changes lives. So, we went into it knowing we needed to find someone to tell their story whose life had been changed by education. And Rita's story emerged as a front runner for that. And the messaging is clear and concise and runs throughout the whole video. It was a highly successful campaign because their audience knew exactly what they were supposed to respond to. They knew they were supposed to give as a response to what they just saw, and they did. And also a cool story about Rita. I know some of you interview people, and lots of times people get cold feet. So We showed up in Selma, Alabama with our production crew. We set up in this beautiful historical chapel. It was kind of evening. I remember it was dusk and we were going to lose our light pretty soon, so we had to do the interview quick. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and Rita didn't show up. And sometimes storytelling is really hard. Rita had a lot of trauma in her past. She was afraid of facing it. She was afraid of the questions we might ask her. So the school's development director called her, and she confirmed, yeah, I just decided I didn't want to do it. And she was like, no, you're doing it. Like, we have this production crew here. We know this will be good for you at the end of the day. Please, will you commit to doing this tomorrow? And she was like, I guess maybe we can do it after I'm done teaching for the day. So the development director drove to Rita's school where she taught. She walked Rita out to her car. She followed her home and blocked her car in her driveway. I don't recommend you all do this for your interviewees, by the way. Rita went inside and changed, came back out, and the development director escorted her to the interview so that she would tell her story. And I'm going to show you a video at the end of what it meant to Rita, but if you're interviewing people, you are giving them a chance to make meaning of their stories, and that is such an amazing and beautiful thing. It is also really scary when you're asking someone to put their story out into the world, so you also have to take great care of the people that you're sharing their stories. Okay, so I want to talk through some interview techniques too. If you are people who don't interview, this is still like great, just everyday stuff that you can apply in your casual conversations. Interview techniques, conversation techniques, just great life skills. So, cultivate curiosity. This is something that I encourage people to do in their day-to-day lives. I interview for our production company, so I'm constantly, every person I meet, I'm asking them questions, I'm getting to know them. It's practice for interview day. If you meet someone, ask yourself, I wonder this about them, I wonder that about them. And you are gonna be on your way to being a great interview. So always be cultivating your own curiosity. How many of you, just curious, how many of you in this room do conduct interviews? A lot of you. Okay. So, as you can see from my messaging strategy section, I am super prepared for every interview that I go into. Know your storytellers up front, know what content you would like to get from them, write questions that support the content that you would like to get from them, but then set those questions aside when you sit down to actually interview them. The best interviews are a casual back and forth conversation. If the person you're interviewing feels like they're being interviewed, they are not going to open up to you in ways that are going to be new and unique. They're going to keep that wall between them. I'm being interviewed. What are they asking me? What are they going to think about me? It feels like they're not listening because they're just asking me another question. So write your questions and be brave enough to set them aside. Conduct your interview knowing that you know the story, you know what you want to accomplish, and then at the end, pick your questions back up and make sure that you got all of the content you need. So a casual conversation is absolutely the best way to get new and unique content and will take down that barrier between you and the person that you're interviewing. Next up, use restatements. And this really comes from my counseling background. If any of you have been to a therapist before, they probably have said to you something like, so it sounds like you're feeling sad. That's what a restatement is. It's simply reflecting back to the person in different words what you just heard them say. And this is the same as writing interview questions and setting them aside. The goal of an interview is to make it feel like a conversation, not I'm asking you a question and you're answering. I'm asking you another question and you're answering again. Restatements are a beautiful technique because they encourage the person that you're talking to open up to a new level and a new layer. So if someone is going on and on about how much they love teaching, for example, they finish, you might just simply reflect back to them, so it sounds like you really love your job. And I used to think people would be like, I just told you that. Good, Kristen. But what happens is actually something really magical. They will start to open up to you in new and more emotional ways. Yes, I do love my job. You're right. And these are the things that I love about it. So that's where you're going to get your amazing interview content if you can go that layer deeper. Which brings me to the last one here, which is peeling the onion. So another counseling technique, Fritz Perls, he was a psychotherapist back in the 40s and 50s, founder of a technique called Gestalt therapy. And he said, getting to the core of someone's personality is like peeling an onion. So the first time you interact with them, you're going to see the surface layer. The next time you interact with them, you'll get a layer deeper. The next time, a layer deeper if you're a trustworthy source. So in an interview situation, what this looks like is the first time you ask someone a question, the response you're going to get from them is the response they're comfortable with. They've told this story a million times, not a lot of emotion behind it. This is the story, here you go. Okay. Don't be afraid to circle back and ask questions again, digging a little bit deeper. Because the second time you ask those questions, you are going to get to the emotional layer of someone's story. And this is where everyone stops. With Rita's story, okay, she cried. You know, we got our goal, donors are going to respond to that, they're going to give. Someone laughed, they were passionate about what they were talking about. Okay, that's great, we're going to end the interview, got what we needed. But there's actually a third and final layer. So every one of you who conduct interviews out there, end your interviews by asking the question, what did this all mean to you? You're an amazing teacher. What does it mean to you that you get to teach students all day? What does it mean to Rita that she got to go to Concordia College, Alabama? The answer to those questions of what did this all mean to you is what ties everything together in a way that is promoting of closure and meaning and hope. It will be the last pieces of every single story that you put out there is the meaning making. So it's surface layer, emotional layer, meaning making layer. Those are the 3 levels of every single interview that you should work to achieve. And last but not least, this is so important in every single interview that you conduct. It's also really important in everyday life. Mind your nonverbals. So Professor Emeritus, his name is Albert Morabian, he works at UCLA. He put together this theory of communication that basically says our facial expressions account for 55% of what people will read about you. What you put on your face, 55% of it is what people are going to make judgments on. Your tone of voice is going to come across as 38%. Your words are only 7% of how people will perceive you. So as you're creating content, as you are conducting interviews, working to tell stories, work on yourself first. I always say that because you, as the interviewer, are going to be the person that makes that person feel safe enough to open up to you to get great content. So if your facial expressions are off, if your tone of voice is bored, they're going to shut down. They're not going to give you what you're hoping for because your words are only 7% of what they're reading in you. So nonverbals that are important: eye contact, physical distance, posture, gestures, volume and pace, facial expression. Those go miles. And if you can work on those key things within yourself, you are going to be a safe person for people to open up to. They're going to give you great, new, fresh content that you want and need to put out into the world. And if you have that content that you're putting out in that way, people are going to respond to it. So nonverbals is huge. Oh, tone. Forgot that one at the bottom. So I said earlier, stories will also transform your storytellers. So the people who you are interviewing, they will be transformed by the process of getting to share their story with the world. So I want to share with you kind of what happened at the end of Rita's interview, because I think it's something that we all strive for. She was terrified. She didn't want to tell her story to the point where she didn't show up. She was escorted to set the next day, and at the end of her interview, this was what happened.
Thank you. You don't know what you've done. You don't know what you've done for me. You just don't know.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Golly. You white people, I tell you, know what to do, Joe. Know what to do, Joe. Gosh, I'll just pull stuff out of people.
So I share that because this is why we do what we do. Telling stories, sharing content, it means something at the end of the day. And it means something to the people whose stories that you're using, and it means something to your audience because that storytelling is so collaborative. So thank you for all of the great work you are doing now in the world. Thank you for the great work that you're going to do in the future. I know that you will. Tying it all together, the power of story, creating a master plan, interviewing for action. I think you're ready to get out there and do. So thanks. If you want to follow us, these are our handles. Thanks for having me today.